Hey, what's up, guys? I just realized I'm watching the French debates. Might as well just go live and watch it with you guys. This wasn't part of the plan, if you're wondering why I'm live. So, but might as well, right? You guys watch it with me. Let's go.
200 quicker with fewer resources and cheaper to accommodate as many people as possible. But I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's financial framework because the Conservatives want to cut. They're going to have to cut spending at some point as well. The Liberals want to cut in revenue but increase expenditure. There's some financial magic that's in there somewhere. I would like to hear their financial framework or even their electoral platforms.
In a minute,
that would be
the
nice.
Constant Plan. But Mr. Carney, 500,000 housing units.
And we need to get started so that we can get the housing market working better with a reduction in bureaucracy at the municipal level and in fees. But we are proposing a new institution, Build Canada Homes, which is going to build affordable homes using lumber from Quebec, using lumber from British Columbia, using Canadian wood, and using new Canadian technologies. We are going to create a new industry.
It seems to me, you say 500,000 units? I mean, I could say 800,000, 400,000. Where's this coming from?
You know, if I can have 35 seconds, we need to add funding of $25 billion for the development of affordable homes and $10 billion for...
Mr. Poilievre, you haven't costed your objective.
Yes, we will in our platform, which is going to come out in a few days. But Mr. Carney, you're repeating exactly the same promises that Justin Trudeau has been making for 10 years. During the Liberal decade, when you were the economic advisor, the cost of housing has gone up.
Of England,
and you inflated the cost of housing then too. You have a terrible record in England for real estate costs there, the real estate prices. The problem is that the Liberals want to build bureaucracy. They want to balloon bureaucracy by creating new departments, new bureaucrats. We don't need more bureaucrats. We need more homes, more new doors on new homes for young families. The reason why housing has become so expensive today is because of taxes and bureaucracy. I will eliminate the GST on new homes. I will incentivize cities to free up land and accelerate permits so that we can build your home.
Mr. Singh, then Mr. Carney.
Let us talk records. Mr. Poilievre, you were a housing minister. How many homes did you build?
Over 200,000.
I'll tell you, 6. You built 6 homes.
200,000.
6.
200,000.
We cannot believe what
you
you're
asked
saying.
the question. Can I answer it?
We cannot believe Mr. Poilievre. He only built 6 homes
200,000
when he was in power.
Can I answer?
We know the answer.
Can
it's
I
6.
answer? It was 200,000 that year, and the cost of the average home was $450,000. So thanks very much for reminding everyone of my record. It was a good record.
During the 10 years the Conservatives were in power, rent doubled, housing costs doubled. And then when the Liberals came in, they doubled again. Unfortunately, Mr. Carney benefited from the housing crisis when he was the board chair at Brookfield Investments. His company benefited from the housing crisis by buying up affordable buildings and tripling rents.
Mr. Carney.
Okay, Mr. Poilievre's approach is everyone for themselves. In the COVID crisis, he said, okay, let's cut taxes, let's cut bureaucracy. This crisis, now that we're facing the greatest crisis of our lives, he's saying, cut taxes, cut bureaucracy. In a crisis, you have to do that to a certain point, but you have to act as a government. And if I may, you need to have capital to catalyze investment. And with a small amount of catalyzing investment from the Government of Canada, we can create huge private investment and a new Canadian industry.
All right, Mr. Blanchet, then Mr. Poilievre.
Another proposal that I find interesting is to allow parents who have money in savings for their retirement to take the money temporarily to help for their kids' down payment. That's not $500 billion that will be required. These are not civil servants that will be fired. This is a logical decision made by parents like myself who want to help their kids without money from the state, with a tax measure that helps retirees who want to help their children. Would that not be more concrete than programs after programs that are just empty words and for which there's no financial framework?
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a minute, but let's let Mr. Poilievre conclude because you were having a conversation
Yes.
with Mr. Carney.
Mr. Carney, in 2020 and 2021, you said that inflation wouldn't happen and that it would have been a good thing if it did. You were quoted in the media and you even advised Justin Trudeau to print money, and that's what caused our inflationary crisis. You're just like Justin Trudeau. You have exactly the same policies, the same approach. We need change. And you, Mr. Carney, you do not
You don't
embody
represent change. You represent the ultra-rich.
Mr. Poilievre is not Justin Trudeau. I'm not Justin Trudeau either, okay? In this election, the question is, who is going to succeed? Who is going to face Mr. Trump?
Same parties, same ministers, same caucus, same ideology, same hostility against Quebec. It's not just because the leader changes that the philosophy will magically change overnight.
You are all proposing, or just about all of you are proposing tax cuts. We'll see them up on the screen here. Mr. Carney announced that on the first day of the campaign. Mr. Poilievre's been announcing them for a long time. So for a couple earning $90,000 a year, you can see the numbers up here: $1,299 in savings for the Conservatives, $1,011 for the NDP, $577 for the Liberals. And the cost of those measures is really what I want to underline here. Mr. Poilievre, you're spending more on tax cuts than the NDP or Liberals. Now, you've all arrived here this evening with no costed financial plan. It's been a long time since we've seen that at the time of the leaders' debate, the leaders don't have a costed plan. So we don't know how you're going to pay for these tax cuts.
I told you guys.
Now,
no one
I'm going to be
of these
careful
guys
how I word this, but don't you think it's irresponsible to Canadian voters to do this? Mr. Carney, you said you've got the numbers, but where's your costed plan?
As I've just said, we'll be presenting our costed platform this weekend.
But why not earlier at an event?
There are 10 days left in the election campaign. It's about the same thing as Mr. Poilievre, as I've seen. And it is going to be costed, and the operational budget will be cleaned up. We'll balance it in 3 years. But at the same time, we will be investing in Canada and in Canadians.
Mr. Poilievre, where would you make the cuts? This comes back to my earlier question to Mr. Carney. In terms of the costed plans, what do you have to hide? Will transfers to provinces go down, for example?
We're going to cut consultants. Believe it or not, a Canadian family is spending $1,400 in federal tax just to pay for consultants. That's been a 100% increase. I'm going to cut consultants. Secondly, we're going to cut the cost of bureaucracy through attrition. People will be retiring, and we don't need to replace all of them. We can slowly, gradually reduce the cost of the bureaucracy. Third, we're going to pass a dollar-for-dollar bill. For every new dollar in spending, there will have to be a dollar in reduced spending. And we are going to generate $70 billion more in revenues.
And Mr. Carney don't have a costed plan that we've seen.
We are the only party that has talked about ways to increase government revenues. We have talked about closing tax loopholes, getting rid of tax havens, empowering the CRA to go after corporations that are not paying their taxes. These are not tax increases. These are taxes that are already supposed to be paid. The CRA has said that tens of billions of dollars in revenues are being lost. Pierre Poilievre has been very honest with Canadians. He will cut. He will cut
Not
healthcare.
true. No,
He will
not true.
cut
That's false.
EI. He said
That's
this back in
false.
2022 when he became leader of the Conservative
true.
Party.
That's false.
And Mark Carney has also said very clearly that he would make massive
no.
cuts.
No.
He would cut $43 billion worth
For
of
the first
spending.
time.
Mr.
No.
Carney, then Mr. Blanchet.
No, that's not right at all. I've said there is an operational budget that's over $200 billion a year. And that budget has grown 9% year over year over the last 10 years. We need to slow down that growth. And we'll do that with technology. We'll do that with attrition, as Mr. Poilievre has suggested. And we can do that, and we will do that. And it's necessary, but we're not going to cut transfers to individuals, nor transfers to the provinces.
So the provinces will not get less money. Mr. Blanchet, is that what you believe?
Well, I've an issue with this. These are Harry Potter financial frameworks. You need a lot of magic to make it work. There
You
needs to
just
be
said
more
Harry
money,
Potter,
but we're
you
going to
know.
do cuts. They want to be
wow.
more conservative than the Conservatives. Basic economic state that when there's a threat of recession or slowdown, that is when the state, well, that's why we're not saying cut taxes. We're saying make good investments. We want to invest in our military forces. It's the time to do so with Canadian companies, the Quebec Tramway that Mr. Poilievre doesn't want to do. That's what we have to do. We have to have targeted investments, health transfers so that the Maisonneuve-Rosemont Hospital can be
We'll do that.
renovated. It's time to invest in infrastructure, public infrastructure with public money so that everyone can keep their jobs.
So no tax cuts.
No, it wouldn't be a tax cut. There would be a specific budget for
It's
it.
necessary.
We have to keep going. They want to do one thing and the other. Cut, but somehow make more money. Something doesn't work.
We've started with the cost of living. We have to cut taxes for the cost of living.
What Mr. Blanchet said is true. You are talking about a magic spell here, Mr. Carney. This is one rare moment where we agree. On February 16th, you sat down with Rosemary Barton and you said that you would cut spending in
Yes,
the operating budget.
operational spending. That's different.
You said
One at a time, please.
that this would affect transfers for
No.
healthcare and to
No,
individuals.
Mr. Roy, no,
I have a question.
that's not right at all. That's not right at all.
Please, Mr. Carney, you'll have the opportunity to answer later. The question that people are asking themselves, and you may have heard this, Mr. Singh, you've promised that every Canadian will have a family doctor, that there will be vastly more nurses. Does the federal government need to continue developing more national plans like pharmacare and dental care? Or option two, should they be giving more money to the provinces for healthcare? Mr. Carney, you'll start off. More programs or more money?
First
for
of all,
programs?
the priority for the federal government is to invest and to catalyze investment in the most serious crisis we're facing in our lives. We need to catalyze private investment in our economy to create new and good jobs. That's the first thing we need to do. In terms of transfers to provinces for healthcare, yes, there are limits to the federal government's activity. No,
So no new
programs. No.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's easy. All premiers from the provinces and territories unanimously asked for a 35% health transfer. I would like to re-explain it. The federal government receives more money than it needs. It needs $10, it gets 12. Quebec needs $10, but it only gets 8. So the federal government could take its surplus and say, I would like to invest in your jurisdictions. The Liberals and the Conservatives agree on this, and the NDP loves butting its nose into provincial jurisdiction. The Constitution sets out jurisdictions. The
All right.
easiest way is to give the money
Mr.
without
Singh?
conditions.
You've said that we do need to step in, that we need to have more programs like this.
Let me explain. Absolutely, we need to increase health transfers. Absolutely, in order to help out the provinces. What is more, we are now in the midst of a crisis, a healthcare crisis. It is being felt here in Quebec and all throughout the country. We should recognize that a leader is someone who looks for solutions, not excuses. I believe that we should be investing more in fixing problems. And yes, we can work with the provinces to hire more healthcare workers. We can work with them to get through this crisis. Pharmacare is one area where everyone can come together to bring down the cost of medication. We believe in helping people.
Deciding Quebec's priorities isn't your jurisdiction. I don't go to your house and tell you how to paint your wall, do I? It's money that you would refuse to give Quebec.
We can do two things at once. We can transfer money and then work with the provinces on other solutions.
Mr. Poilievre, more money to the provinces or more federal programs?
I think the federal government is taking too much tax revenues and delivering too little. And that's the Liberal track record after 10 years. And the question for Canadians is, you can't afford your groceries and you can't afford your rent or your housing because it's too expensive now after 3 terms of Liberal government. Will a 4th Liberal term change things for you enough for you to be able to buy a house and have a beautiful life?
Okay. For the health program, I didn't understand.
On healthcare, no. What I propose on that is a program that the federal government could coordinate, and that is to do with licenses for doctors and nurses. It would be a voluntary program, as has previously existed, to allow immigrants to be licensed and be able to work in our hospitals to reduce your wait times.
So everyone agrees on health transfer. The question is, the 13 premiers of the 13 economies of Canada. Canada doesn't have one economy, it has 13 economies. These requests were made to stop the deterioration
Very good.
of the healthcare system.
Next theme. Energy and climate.
Oh, energy and climate. Let's go. This is going to be a good one.
The carbon tax was something that was supposed to help the environment, but now, what are we doing for the environment? It worries me a bit. Our planet is starting to die. I really want to see someone who can prioritize climate change and the economy in Canada. We shouldn't be building a pipeline. The environmental consequences are very serious, even if for ecological reasons it's not the best solution. Well, I think we have to think about it. There was a good project in place, but then it was dropped. A pipeline would have a major impact. We may have to make sacrifices if we want to be more independent.
Okay.
Drill, baby, drill, says Donald Trump. But I have a very simple question for you, and I would like just a simple answer as well. You have 35 seconds open debate. Do you want Canada to increase oil production? Yes or no? Mr. Singh.
I would be in favor of investing in clean energy, renewable energy. With our public money, I would spend on projects like an east-west clean energy grid. That's the sort of thing we need.
I
we
see
need
you.
renewable energy for our future. That is where we should invest our public funds.
So
I see you, though.
more
I see you. Welcome
or
to the
less
show.
oil or the same amount
Tell your
as
friends,
right
tell
now?
them to join us on the
You
show
want
here.
to increase it? That's what people want to know. Are you increasing oil production?
There are a few measures that I support. Investing in clean energy, bringing down our
We'll get to that
emissions.
in the open debate later.
You guys get in
But the
the
question
comments
is
if
very
you're
simple, I
watching.
think. Mr. Carney.
Yes, more oil
Let me know
so
what
that
you
we can
think so
reduce our imports, especially our imports from the United States, a country that is threatening us right now. But in order to do that, we need to have low-risk oil. Canada is a low-risk country, and low-cost oil. Canada's more or less that right now, but we also need low-carbon oil because we need to be competitive over the long term. So at the same time, we need to have pipelines. We need to invest in carbon stockage, carbon capture as well. That's very important
We'll
for our
get to that
competitiveness.
later. Mr. Poilievre, should
right.
we produce more oil in Canada?
Yes. And we have to be able to get it to market by pipeline. Unfortunately, the other parties passed an unconstitutional law, C-69, which is a no more pipelines bill. And that's why Canadians and Quebecers now have to buy 139,000 barrels of U.S. oil every day. I will repeal C-69 to allow for the construction of hydroelectric projects, mines, and also pipelines so that we can get around Donald Trump's
Well, you're similar
anti-sovereign
off
when
to
it
you
comes to
guys.
energy.
I don't know. I don't
competition
know. To me, it
as to
just
who
seems a
will be
little
the biggest oil
reserved.
head here. The Americans buy our oil, we buy their oil, because that's how geography works. I want less oil, but let us be clear. The one that approved 9B for Enbridge was me when I was the Environment Minister, but I say that we have to progressively wean off of petrol and oil because the cost on families will be far worse than what Mr. Poilievre says.
Good to have you on the show.
Paying for the consequences of climate change will cost.
I see you. What are you
billions
thinking of the
dollars
debate so far?
every
Let me
single
know.
year
Let
per
me know.
family.
Let me know.
Let us invest in
Thank you,
Quebec's
Mr.
green
Blanchet.
energy.
I'd like to ask a question to launch the debate. Mr. Carney, for 17 years now, the Liberals have been telling us that the only way to fight against climate change is to put a price on carbon with the carbon tax. There was elections on this. But the first day you came to power, you abolished this tax. What should Canadians understand from this? Is the fight against climate change no
He'll
longer a
tell you that
priority
it's
for
too
Liberals?
Not at all.
divisive.
It
That's what I
is
expect
still
you
a
to say.
priority, and it's a priority for Canada. We're talking a lot about
Divisive.
diversifying our trade partners around the world. The European Union. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in manufacturing and energy in all of our products so that we can have better access to that market. But in terms of the carbon tax, we cut the consumer carbon tax. And that covers about 6% of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We are maintaining the industrial carbon tax for big polluters, but
No,
we're creating
they're
a new
actually a little
market
bit
so that
reserved.
major polluters will pay
Like you
people
said, so
and
someone just said
households
the
to
cat
make
fight
Mr.
has not
Poilievre,
started
decisions.
yet. Yeah, they're
you
not
would
really going
axe
after each other
the
as
second
much
carbon
as I
tax
thought
as
just
well,
yet.
the industrial tax. You would emulate both.
They've had
you
some
would
little
both.
spats here and there.
So there's not even a fight against climate change or no incentive except
That's not true.
less gas.
There's a cost associated with using energy already, but my approach is a pragmatic one. For example, the National Bank calculated that if we export our natural gas, our liquefied natural gas, to India, for example, to replace coal, that could reduce emissions in India by 2.5 billion tons. That's 3 times the emissions of all of Canada, and would also bring a lot of money back to Canada. The Liberals are blocking the construction of the pipeline and of the LNG plants. For example, LNG Quebec is a project that would make it possible for us to sell our energy very profitably to Europe and reduce Europe's dependence on Putin. And that's what I would like to do instead of feeding
Mr.
into
Blanchet,
Putin's war machine.
Mr. Carney's abolition of the carbon tax means that Canadians outside of Quebec will receive a rebate for several weeks still for a tax that has been cut. So this puts Quebec in an unjust position. What are you asking in this respect?
Another element, it might give Mr. Carney's an opportunity to answer. Last year, Canada invested $30 billion in oil. Trans Mountain cost $40 billion. It took 9 years to build it. That means that with only just these elements, that's $16 billion of Quebec money that was invested in oil. Do you want a great energy worksite? It's Quebec's green worksite. So let's invest there. With regards to the $3.7 billion, the government would preemptively reimburse the tax carbon. Now the carbon tax. Now they've cancelled the carbon tax before the elections, but they're still sending reimbursements for expenditures that people won't have to do because the carbon tax no longer exists. Quebec is responsible and still has a cap and trade system like California. We're being penalized. We're taking
Carney's
$800 million
come
out
and
of
throwing the liberals
Quebec's
under the bus.
Quebecers' pockets.
Yep.
That's $100 per person.
Glad somebody else noticed that. He's been
Including
throwing Trudeau under the
newborn
bus.
babies, $800 from
in a nice
everyone's
way, but
pockets. $100 from everyone's pockets to offer electoral
Mr. Carney.
baubles just
That's a
before
great
election.
catch.
Is there not an injustice there?
It's not an injustice. Quebec is a pioneer in carbon markets, and that's clear. First point. And the second
I
point,
think Carney's handling himself well. I'm not
Canadians
gonna lie.
outside
He's
of
handling
Quebec
himself well.
and British Columbia have paid the carbon tax, and as such, they receive the carbon rebate, and all Canadians, including Quebecers, will receive the middle class tax cut.
I think Carney is too comfortable.
Because
Someone needs
we
to
have-
rough him
we
up a
have-
bit. I'm gonna
What we've
say.
done, there's a principle here. There's an important principle here.
Yes, you're going to speak in a moment.
It
Just in
bothers
terms
me a
of
little bit why
Clarity for those
Poilievre
who are
is so
listening to us. What reimbursement are you talking about?
The
why is Poilievre so
the
quiet?
rebate. No, not in Quebec. No, not in Quebec.
But
But
Quebec
there's a
gas
principle.
prices are higher.
There's a principle here. We are making people whole, people who paid the carbon tax, and we're doing that in a fair way.
Europe, Quebec, and California has a system that incentivizes companies to
We've
reduce
also-
their greenhouse gas emissions. It's about 9 cents per liter, and
Mr.
it's much
Singh.
cheaper than the potential effects and the future effects of climate
Just to
change.
get back to the debate topic, we are talking about the climate crisis here. That is not something that is a long way off. This is something going on right now. We are already in the midst of the climate crisis. We have seen it here in Quebec. Extreme temperatures, forest
Yeah,
fires,
Poilievre has
flooding.
been. You're asking what happened to Poilievre.
I
I don't
agree
know.
with
Somebody,
Mr.
if you
Blanchet
find
that
him, I think Mr.
It is
Poilievre is missing
too
in
high a
action
cost
here.
to
Somebody
bear, so
call
we
his
need to
number.
do something.
Somebody
I spoke
dial that
with,
man's number.
one mother before I became a father, and she said,
Carney,
I'm worried about my children when they play outside. I'm worried about the BC forest
Is what
fires.
Braveheart is asking
Our
here.
children cannot breathe
So,
the air
because this is a
outside. And
French
now that
debate,
I am
there
a
is
father,
particular
I feel
focus
the
on
same
Quebec, so
anxiety.
it doesn't surprise me that they're asking him so much about like
With forest
Quebec,
fires, people
but they're
cannot
asking so
breathe
much about
the
Quebec in
air.
general.
So we need to do something. We need to protect our environment, and we need to protect our
Mr.
children.
Poilievre, you're clear. You're saying that we need a pipeline. If, in spite of all of your efforts with the indigenous nations, they say no, would you impose it in spite of all of your efforts? If Quebec says no, would you impose it?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't assume that because most Quebecers want a pipeline. According to the polls, look, there's no social acceptability for the status quo. Thank you very much.
That is the most
Can
empty
I
sentence
speak?
I've ever heard in this debate
Can
so
I answer?
far.
It was an empty sentence.
That is just, it's nonsense.
It
Absolute
was
nonsense.
not. It
I'll
was
say
an
what it
empty
means.
sentence.
I'll tell you. Quebecers
Come on, Pierre.
who buy
Come
oil
on.
from Alberta, it's got to go through the U.S. currently, which gives Donald Trump power over our own
that's
energy.
better.
You say you're in favor of sovereignty. I'm in favor of economic sovereignty and energy sovereignty, and that requires a
It's
pipeline
yet
across
another
Canada.
scarecrow. The US will never bomb their economy so much by sacrificing a
You never
hugely
know.
profitable product. That's such an amazing argument. How much will your pipeline cost? Trans Mountain cost $40 billion, but now you want a 4,600 kilometer pipeline without investors, with Europe that doesn't even
Mr.
want it in the
Poilievre and
first
Mr.
place.
Just to clarify, I would never subsidize pipelines. That's unnecessary. They're very profitable. The only reason why it's expensive now is because there are rules and legislation that prevent the construction of pipelines because of bureaucracy. We're going to get rid of red tape. We're going to open this up to
I'll ask my question again.
Protections, cutting environmental regulations.
If Indigenous nations, in spite of all your nice efforts, and talking about Mr. Carney and you who want a pipeline, if they refuse, what do you do?
Refuse? Are you saying across the board?
Yes, we've seen this.
Because
He can't say that. He doesn't get to impose his will.
Mr. Poilievre, if there are Indigenous nations or provinces that are against it, what do you do?
well, there are others who will be in favor. For example, Mr. Carney opposed a pipeline in the West, which would have enabled us to sell our oil to Asia, the Northern Gateway
Yeah, I told you,
project.
none of them like
80% of First Nations were in
None of
favor,
them like
20% were
because
against. And in a
obviously
case like
he's
that, I think the
attacked,
majority
like
rules.
Jagmeet's in the past,
And I
he's
think we
attacking
need to
Francois Blanchet a little
allow
bit.
our companies to
Obviously,
pay some
Carney.
of their taxes
Nobody
directly
likes
to
Pierre.
First Nations to fight poverty through industry
Mr.
and
Carney.
production. That's our approach.
Would you be ready to impose one?
No, never impose. Can I respond, please? Never impose. No, but a couple of points. First of all, our relationship with the United States has changed everything. So imports from the United States and geography, as Mr. Poilievre has said, around pipelines, those are problems. Those are national security problems for us, and we need to act. That's the first point. Second, on March 21st, there was a meeting of the premiers. All the premiers were here in Ottawa, and we sat down and we agreed. All the premiers signed an agreement to have an energy corridor that would cover oil, natural gas, clean energy, and critical minerals. And with that, and with a process with Indigenous leaders,
Yeah,
and we could
Braveheart
have
says
a solution to this
I'll read
problem.
this after.
And that's an example of leadership. That's an example of bringing leaders together to meet a national goal. We need to do more than that over this crisis.
I'll ask the question again. If ever Indigenous
Nobody's
nations
answering
No,
the
I've
question.
said no.
against
Anyways,
it,
Braveheart
you
says,
forget
I
the
don't know if
project?
this is because
No.
it is translated,
force
but
projects on
PP is
people.
Listen,
stuttering and looks a little
It's a
green.
question.
I don't know.
Okay,
He's a
another
little off
question
in this debate. I
about the
will say that.
environment.
Yeah, I agree
Here's
with
a
you.
question.
Yeah, Poilievre
You have
is
said
a
that
little
you
off.
are a pragmatic person. Do you
Yeah,
agree that it is
they had
not
given
pragmatic
Marconi a
to
bit of an
continue
easy
to
ride here.
subsidize
I expected a
oil
lot
companies
better
with
from, at
billions of
least from
dollars?
Pierre.
That's not pragmatic at all. Would you agree?
Well, I agree with that principle.
Okay, then will you commit to stopping these subsidies?
Absolutely. It's clear.
This is why you need New Democrats. Look at that. We
No,
got a commitment
but
from
It's
Mr.
not
Carney.
new. It's not a new commitment.
This is why you need New
That's not a
Democrats.
new commitment. Let's be very clear.
Mid-February, British Columbia. You, like all other Canadian leaders, said something in English that was, if necessary, you would use the executive emergency powers. You
Oh,
said
yeah,
it.
that's a good
I heard
question,
it
you know.
again yesterday. You would force pipelines through Canada and through
No, no,
Quebec.
no, no, no.
After
No,
2
no, no,
days
no, no.
after that,
No.
with Mr. Roy,
That's not it. That's not it at all.
no, please be nice, we're almost friends. But then you said to Mr. Roy, I would never like to force this. So it's not rules
No.
that stop this, it's social acceptability that stopped this pipeline because people said no.
Mr. Carney, please reply.
Okay, no. It's the use of emergency powers for the federal government. That's for federal approval. But there also has to be approval, for example, here in Quebec. There has to be approval from the provinces and the support of Indigenous people. This is Canada. That's how Canada works. But another point, if I may, we're starting to see cooperation agreements come into place with the provinces to have one project, one evaluation, and that's going to accelerate the approval of major projects in
Great.
Canada.
Mr. Blanchet, you said that I have a greater chance of signing the Canadian Constitution than approving a pipeline. But how could you really paint yourself in such a corner and say never, ever? If our relationship with the U.S. gets worse, the pipeline goes to the United States, if our ports become trickier in terms of imports, what would you do? What would
Mr.
you
Trump's
tie your hands?
threat is a very serious one. But he won't self-destruct the American economy. And Americans
I
think that Canadian
think
oil is in their
Francois
backyard.
Blanchet
There's
blowing
no
his
rule
own
that
campaign up
stops
here.
oil from being built or circulating. But
By
Quebec,
sticking to this, I think
Quebec
he's blowing his own
wanted, and Mr.
campaign
Carney
up.
said, I will like to respect Quebec's environmental rules.
Yeah, he's leaning too
So
far into this
there are
whole
certain elements that are
U.S. loving
incoherent from him.
aspect. I think he's blowing his own campaign. I
Never.
don't know.
It's a long
It's still
time.
no,
What do you
because
guys think?
Quebec is the best placed in the world to develop a green super energy market that goes right to the south without asking Ottawa's permission. Why would we invest in oil that doesn't have economic benefits for Quebec if it means that we still pay more at the pump?
Two quick comments. You are slightly behind in terms of the tramway and the third link. We're talking about the environment and public transit as well. So the third link, would you fund this or the tramway? One or the other,
is
or
simple.
both?
Yes, for the Quebec City Tramway, we support public transit. We are against projects that are bad for the environment.
So you're against the third link.
Exactly. We are against the third link. We support the tramway.
What is this?
One solution
that-
to address the climate crisis, while at the
This
same
guy's
time
bought
helping our economy, is
Blowing
to
himself
invest
and
heavily
blowing
in public
people.
transit.
What
This
does
would
that
help
mean? You got to provide
municipalities, help-
context. You can't
This
just
would help
say someone is
provinces. We can
blowing
work
another
together with them
person.
and use
Come on.
transfers to
You got to
provide
provide
more funding
context
for
for
these
that
projects,
statement.
and
I
they're
don't
the
know
sort
what
of
you're
projects
talking
we
about.
need. They would create good jobs while at the same time helping Canada reduce
Mr.
emissions.
Poilievre, tramway or a third link, both,
So you
or
gotta-
just the third link?
blowing himself and
Just
blowing
the
PP.
third link.
Pause.
You have to make choices.
Pause.
And I would
Anyways.
speak to people in the regions today. The other parties are against the third link, and they want to ban gas-powered cars. That's not practical in the regions of our country. You need a truck, you need a car in order to live in regional areas. So I'm going to reverse that. You'll be able to keep your truck. We will build highways and bridges so that you can live a good life in the
Mr. Blanchet?
regions.
Both projects?
The Quebec government wants the tramway. The city of Quebec City, rather, wants the tramway. The federal government needs to give the money required to the provincial government for the tramway. We don't know what a third link looks like. We don't know where it's going to go, under, over. We don't know what color it's going to be.
You are
Yes,
supposed
but-
to give your opinion on that for the past
Well,
three debates.
Please remind me of my
Mr.
past.
Carney?
Well, I can be quick. Tramway, yes, because there is a project that's underway. We support it. And as Mr. Blanchet has said, there is no project right now for the third link.
But I think the third link will be a blue one.
It'll be blue? Right.
I don't have a lot of time left, but I'll add one more question. Do we have to speed up the development of nuclear power
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And for a couple of reasons.
across Quebec, in Ontario?
Well, yeah,
Yeah, obviously.
it's a choice that Quebec and the provinces will make. But we have a major advantage here in Canada. We have uranium. We have big nuclear companies, including Westinghouse, Candu, and others. And we have technology
yes.
in small modular reactors. So it's a great opportunity.
I understand there are worlds in the countries in the world that need nuclear energy. I don't think Canada needs nuclear energy. Quebec doesn't want it. I'm not going to interfere in Canadian energy,
Well,
but
they could be.
Quebecers don't
feel
want
like-
nuclear energy.
Oh my God.
I'm also the one that managed the closure of the
Yes.
Gentilly plant.
But we're not going to reopen it.
As a national project,
So
I am in favor of an east-west energy grid that would connect Quebec with Manitoba and
Nuclear
BC
power?
to transport clean energy. It could. I'm
Perfect.
not so much in favor of nuclear energy. I support renewable
Poilievre,
and hydro
nuclear power.
energy more.
In favor. Yep.
So Quebec
That's one of
Quebec
the best
doesn't want
sources of
oil and gas. They don't want
electricity.
pipelines.
It provides 60%
don't want nuclear
of the
energy.
electricity in
Like-
Ontario. Unfortunately, bureaucracy slows down
Like, where are they going
construction
with this?
without adding
I
any
don't really
safety.
understand.
So
Like-
I would take the politicians off the Nuclear Safety Commission and allow scientists to do the work so that we can add
Very
that
good.
source of energy to the portfolio.
This is the first time I've heard Mr. Poilievre say something
Next theme,
pro-science.
Dude,
immigration.
Why is
Next
the
theme,
moderator
immigration and
taking
foreign
a
affairs.
swipe at Poilievre though? Come on, he just. So I don't know if you guys heard, but
There are
the
lots of issues with immigration.
moderator just
that are
said
linked
this the
to
first
Donald
time we heard
Trump.
Poilievre say
It's hard to
something
immigrate
about
these
science,
days.
something
I'd like to say if
favorable
I can find a
about
good
science.
job. We have to deal with people who are arriving in droves because people are arriving and they don't have work. Should we let them in or not? Why not? Why
Oh,
not welcome them
yes,
if we
the-
have the capacity? Do you think we should let in anyone who wants to come?
Oh,
In the United, in the United
Yves-François
States, there's one
Blanchet
rule. In Canada, there's
he's
another.
not. He,
I think
he
everyone
knows
should
he's not
follow
going to
the
be
rules.
prime minister, of course, right? He's just trying to win enough seats so he can influence things to
We know there are
favor
over
Quebec.
500,000 Haitians currently living in the United States who are now being threatened with deportation. They might lose their temporary protection. I'll show you the numbers here. This is the number of people crossing the border in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. 1,411 people in the first half of April. That's more than in March, February, or January. So you can see the numbers are growing. Simple question. You have 35 seconds each. Would you accept these Haitians into Canada or not? Mr. Carney.
Ooh,
Well, first of
Alright.
all, this is a question of humanity. This is a human issue. And these are some of the most vulnerable people in North America.
Hmm.
But there are limits. We have to be human, but we have to be realistic. Canada cannot accept everyone. And we have an agreement with the Americans, the Safe Third Country Agreement. And under that agreement, we will send back most asylum
So
seekers.
they would be mostly sent back to the U.S. Mr. Blanchet.
The rules aren't tributary to the origin of the requester. We can't say we'll welcome the Haitians, but tough luck to the Venezuelans. The rules need to be the same for everyone. I'm particularly sensitive to this because I often meet with Haitian representatives. They are francophones, and so it's easier for them to integrate into Quebec. If Quebec is able financially to welcome them, then I'm sympathetic. But the rules have to be applied, and Quebec's welcoming capacity is at its very limit.
The
mm.
formal rule now would be to send them back because they are in a safe third country, i.e. the U.S. Mr. Singh.
In general, we should do our part. It's a question of humanity and compassion.
I wonder what Poilievre is going to say here.
We appreciate the fact that our country
This is
is
an
founded
interesting
on
question.
immigration.
Well,
That is something
Poilievre's wife
important
is,
to
of
us.
course,
We
an
want
immigrant.
immigration levels that are in line
And
with
I want
our
to see
needs.
how
But
he kind of balances things out in terms
Yes, we
of
need to take in people.
people probably
we
want him
cannot
to be
accept
anti-immigration.
people, Well,
So
we don't want them to have a bad life here in Canada and Quebec. So we need immigration, but we
Poilievre.
cannot take everyone.
Yes or no?
The specific question
The question is,
do we accept those people?
for the people crossing the border at La Colle, would they be welcome to Canada or not? Because we have the right to send them back under the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Unfortunately, they have to be returned because immigration has to follow the normal entry points. Quebecers are extremely generous and welcoming. They welcomed my wife, as Mr. Blanchet mentioned, but the Liberal government has abused Quebecers' generosity with an out-of-control immigration system. The population
I think
has
that answer
grown
might
3
win him
times
quite a
faster
few
than the
points, to be
number
fair.
of new homes built. This has created a housing crisis in Quebec. They're at the breaking point, and the government of Quebec has been given the power to choose immigrants. That was under the Mulroney government that power was delegated to Quebec. So
Right.
we need to have realistic numbers, realistic based on our
I need to
housing
jump in
capacity.
here. What Mr. Poilievre is saying is that immigrants
that's not
should be blamed for something that is really the fault of successive conservative and liberal governments who have not invested enough in our resources, who have not built enough housing, who have not welcomed people in the way that they should have been welcomed. This cannot be blamed on immigrants.
That's a good counter.
All right.
That's not true.
That's a good counter.
Quebec is now asking, given the number of asylum
What's your issue with
seekers
Pierre
in its
Poilievre? Come
territory,
on. What is this
for
welcome
$500
back
million.
PP talk? I'm not having that. Come on.
That was the amount they asked for in 2024. Mr. Poilievre, you'll be starting this open debate. Would you be sending a $500 million check to Quebec?
We have to work with the government of Quebec to fix the damage the Liberals caused with an out-of-control immigration system. And I also have to say that I reject the Century Initiative, which is a Liberal policy to balloon Canada's population to 100 million people. That's extreme. I think we should go back to immigration levels that are such that the population never grows faster than the number of houses, jobs, or healthcare
Mr. Carney.
services available.
Would you give more money to Quebec? And more generally, where would you like to have the immigration quota set?
Yes, we'll start with the second part. We need to have a cap on all types of immigration for a certain amount of time so that we can increase our capacity to welcome newcomers to Canada, including in housing, in training and language training here in Quebec, and make sure that the social safety net can accept them. And in those circumstances,
the targets announced by your predecessor, Mr. Trudeau, you would bring them down further, is that correct?
well, there are some challenges here in Quebec, for example. Challenges with temporary foreign workers, for example. And it's a question of distribution, if I can say it that way. The distribution of workers across Quebec. And there's a shortage of workers. But we will maintain the cap on immigration for certainly a couple of years so that we can increase our ability to welcome
Mr.
newcomers.
Singh,
I think Carney has done well in this debate. I was expecting him to be a little
would
bit
you
more
reduce the number of
flustered, but I
immigrants
think
to
he's
Canada
done
in
well,
general?
actually.
Instead of answering with a simple yes or no, I would want to base our response on the facts. It is obvious that we need immigration. When I speak to Quebec farmers, they tell me, yes, we need immigrants to work on our farms. When I talk to small and medium businesses, they tell me that we need immigrants. The question is, what level of immigration? We would base our immigration levels on the findings of an expert panel, which would study our capacities. Then we would have a data-based number. But I do not want to fall into the trap of fear-mongering or blaming immigrants for things. We need a facts-based, needs-based
Mr.
approach.
Blanchet.
Temporary foreign workers are temporary. They're a different category. Foreign students are a separate category, and they are essential for our post-secondary establishments in Quebec and in Canada. Unfortunately, it's being used as a roundabout way to get asylum, and asylum is also taken advantage of through smuggling and organized crime. We don't want to import vulnerable workers because we simply need people. Asylum seekers should be people who are in distress that we need to welcome based on our welcoming capacity. We are not currently in Quebec
So you think we
able
should
to
reduce
welcome as
targets
many people that are
accordingly?
arriving. Quebec needs to be able to establish what its targets are. And one clear element, the federal parliament, with a Bloc Québécois initiative, decided to force the federal government to consult provinces within 100 days to determine how many immigrants would be welcomed. No one can decide, apart from Quebec, how much Quebec can accept and welcome.
Another rare moment where I agree with Mr. Blanchet. Temporary foreign workers are often victims of power abuses. we would restrict the use of workers who are exploited by major corporations.
The Centre Initiative was 100 million immigrants in Canada before the end of the century. Dominic Barton, a parliamentary committee, said that they did not take into account the uniqueness of Quebec, and one of the two co-authors of the Centre Initiative and 100 million people is now one of Mr. Carney's close advisors.
Mr. Carney, on a
That's
different
sneaky
subject now.
question there. No, don't go away from the Century Initiative.
Would you
Ask
say
him
that
that
the
question.
immigration system in Canada is
Come on,
going
guys.
off the rails, or has gone off the rails in the last 7 or 8
Well,
years?
yes, the system isn't working.
Anyways, while he's given
And
the empty answer that I
especially
expect
after
he'll
the
give there,
pandemic,
the Century Initiative is apparently this whole plan by
our population
liberal-leaning
has
organization,
gone up,
by a certain liberal-leaning
I think,
organization that
at
wants
about
to
3%
increase
year
the
because of
Canadian
immigration.
population to 100 million by
And
2030
why
or something like that.
we need to have
I
a
don't
cap
remember the
for a
exact
certain period
year
of time.
that it was
And I can
in
say,
advance.
I'd like to say that
Now, a lot of people
Canadians,
are very
Quebecers,
scared about
and all
that
Canadians,
possibility of that kind of balloon in the
they want
population.
to
Personally, I
welcome
actually don't
immigrants.
think it's as bad as
There's
people
no
like to
problem
believe, because
with
it's
Canadians' attitudes
basically
here at all.
increasing the Canadian
It's
population
the
by
responsibility
a
of
certain
all of
amount
us
over
All right.
to increase our
75 years
capacity
or
to
something.
welcome newcomers.
And
Is it normal? Now, in France, it takes
I've
6
done
months.
this in
In
a video
Germany,
before,
8
but
months.
my point is, it's
So,
not a crazy
why
amount
do
that they're
asylum
increasing the population,
seekers
really.
coming
Anyways,
to
we'll talk
Canada
about that later.
take at least 3 years to be processed?
Because Canada is obstinate in welcoming more people than they can process, house, and they're not taking into account the proportionality of every province and territory.
I spoke with federal public servants, and they told me that there is a lack of resources. There aren't enough workers to manage all the files that are coming in. It's unthinkable that people have to wait 3 years for an answer.
But is that not the
It's
big
a
problem,
huge
Mr. Poilievre?
problem. So we need to have more people working on this. People who can make decisions, or at the very least provide an answer, because it is entirely unacceptable that we have people waiting so long.
Mr. Poilievre, is this problem solvable?
Yes. Look, it's all about efficiency. By screening out bogus asylum seekers, that's what's slowing things down. We could reduce processing times by getting rid of the bogus claimants. And when people are forum shopping, when they've been to other places, that also slows things down and
Can you be
discourages
as severe with
genuine
everyone?
claimants. My point of view is that if someone's in danger in their country of origin, they should be able to decide to come to Canada. But if they're not refugees, for example, we've seen a situation in Mexico where people came here without ever needing to be refugees. They never needed asylum, and that causes a bottleneck in the system. And so what we're going to do is ensure that genuine refugees can come here and have their lives saved through the generosity of
But
Canadians.
how do you separate the real ones from the non-real ones?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, that's the problem. The machine, the apparatus is too cumbersome. And Mexico was one of the
He just
causes in
contradicted
the
himself
problem.
there,
So by
you know.
eliminating that
Mr. Carney.
source,
Like,
that
oh,
you're
the
alleviating
the
the
machine
problem.
is too
Canada?
cumbersome,
No,
but
it's
how
not
do you
acceptable.
verify people, if you're cutting down the
It's
machine?
inhumane.
Anyways,
It's inhumane for asylum seekers. And that's an indication that there is a problem with productivity in that department. That takes resources, but it's also a question of productivity.
Why not hitting the brake pedal with kindness, of course? Why not slow things down until we have a good system and a good public service for immigration that can deal with files in a few months? The rhythm is far too quick, and so we can't succeed at this rate. People, for economic reasons or who are in distress for other reasons, come to Canada and they're lost because
And
their files
just,
aren't
if I may.
being processed.
You can conclude, Mr. Carney.
I more or less agree with that, but we need to be, as you've said, we need to be neutral. We need to act in a neutral and fair way.
All right.
A fair way for
I
all.
want to save some time to talk about two other
Oh.
important files: international
So
aid,
A
Ukraine, and
says,
Gaza.
the
We think we've
moderator
understood your
is
position
super
on
biased
immigration.
against Carney,
The
against
question is
Pierre
simple.
Poilievre.
Should we cut
I don't
international
know.
aid
I know
or
that
not?
I've noticed
I'll
him
give you
being
some
super
figures here.
biased
$2.1 billion is
against
being
Pierre
given to
Poilievre.
Ukraine currently. That's a large amount of money
I
for
don't know that
Canada.
I've noticed that. I don't know if
Ethiopia
there's somebody
also,
else in the chat. You
Haiti.
can let
There's
me
a
know
long
what
list
you've
of other
noticed.
countries that we could have put up on the
I can't say I've
board.
noticed that.
Mr. Poilievre, you've
I
said
think
that we
he's
need
trying
to
to
cut
keep the
international
conversation
aid.
going.
What would you cut?
So he's
Ukraine,
kind of like
Ethiopia, Haiti?
cut
No.
people off when they start
I
to
would
go
start
off.
by cutting off China. The Liberal government gave $250 million to the Chinese Infrastructure Bank in order to build pipelines, highways, and other infrastructure to promote the expansion of Beijing's empire. I don't think that's a good use of taxpayer money. Also, we saw UNRWA, the organization in the Gaza Strip that took part, or whose employees took part in the attacks of September 7th. So I don't think we should be funding that type of activity either. The aid we give should be directly to people in need and not through bureaucracies, multinational bureaucracies and
Let's
terrorists.
talk about Gaza. Currently, Doctors Without Borders, just today, said that the situation was worse than ever. So if you cut UNRWA, which might be an imperfect organization, but if you cut aid to them, how can Canada help Palestinians?
With not-for-profit groups, NGOs that will deliver the services directly
But
to
the
Gazans
only group
on the ground,
I'd like to
because it's a
start.
waste of money when that money that's not even getting to the people.
I will start by saying if there's anyone in an organization with a problem, then yes, that should be investigated. But what you said about UNRWA was disgusting. This is the only organization that is helping out people on the ground. And you painted the entire organization with the same brush, calling it a terrorist organization. That is unacceptable. That is hateful, and it is entirely
Mr.
inappropriate.
Carney, on the subject of Palestinians and international aid, would you continue to fund UNRWA?
Yes, we are in a situation where we need to have an immediate ceasefire. We need to have all the hostages returned, and we need to resume humanitarian aid to Gaza. And at this time, we have $100 million from the Government of Canada that is ready to be provided in humanitarian aid to Gaza with organizations that are working there. And that's key. And I agree with Mr. Singh. There are only a couple of groups that are working in Gaza right now.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's a very unique situation. In Canada and in Quebec, the Jewish community is victims of radical Islamists. Palestinians are currently victims of terrible violence from the Israeli regime. We have to help people in distress. There and elsewhere, it's the best way to have international aid that is not military. We need to allow people to live happily where they live. And Palestine will not become Mar-a-Lago for Americans that just want to chill on the coast.
That's a good line, actually.
We have to see where the money goes. We have to see how much money is taken by Hamas. It's maybe less now, but it was huge in the past. A lot of money was taken from the Palestinians. We have to help Palestinians at the end of the day.
International aid. So the three of you on this side would continue. Mr.
Poilievre doesn't support
do you
foreign
have
aid,
an
though.
amount in your mind of how much you would cut in international aid?
We're going to target waste in all programs. We will audit to identify examples like UNRWA when they used funds for Hamas. We're also going to find other examples of international waste, because
Sorry.
No. The decision is to protect Canadian taxpayers. We all agree that there's a lot of suffering here in Canada, and Canadians can't afford to pay their bills. So we need to find some savings in order to reduce the cost of living here in
Mr.
Canada.
Roy, I would like to come back to
And we need to look at all departments in order to find those savings and protect
I'd like
affordability
to come
No
back
amount.
to
in
the
Canada.
question of
Mr.
Gaza.
Singh, I'm sorry, everyone's had their piece to say.
The situation is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see innocent people being killed. Mr. Carney, why don't you call things as they are? This is a genocide. People in Israel do deserve peace and security, but people in Palestine do as well. What is going on right now is a genocide against people
Mr.
in
Carney,
Palestine.
you can conclude.
Why won't you admit it?
The situation in Gaza, in the Middle East, is horrible. But
It's a
I-
genocide.
But I never use that word in a political way to politicize the situation.
All right.
But it's a matter of facts.
That was Mr. Carney's response. I think we've understood your question, Mr. Singh. Now, we'll be moving on to the next theme, identity and sovereignty.
It would be good to put flags out on our balconies to show our Canadian pride. I was surprised to see how proud people were. We're Canadian. We will not be Americans. I think we're going to be more united. I think I haven't seen this in a long time. So, yes, we've all seen this across Canada.
You know,
All
I don't know about you
commentators
guys, but I
have
feel
seen
like
this.
this debate
There
is
is a
pretty
wave of
surface
patriotism
level.
in Canada,
There's not enough
But
depth to it
we've
for me. I
also
don't know.
seen
Not,
deep divisions.
like they're talking a
in
lot
the
about like,
West.
oh, what do you think
Alberta
about this? There's not a lot of depth
says it
to the
may
discussion.
separate.
I don't know if that's
And we've
just
got
me,
6
but
months to the next
there's not a
prime
lot of
minister
depth
to
to
meet
it
its
at all.
requests. Otherwise, there could be a crisis of national unity that is unprecedented. In Quebec, the Parti Québécois is nearing power and is promising a referendum during your term, possibly. At the end of the day, are we not as divided or as the U.S. or very divided? We'll go around the table. Mr. Poilievre first.
Unfortunately, yes, there are divisions all across Canada, all kinds of divisions. And I think that we've had a federal government that has divided everyone, pitting regions against one another and various groups against one another. Social classes pitted against one another. We need to unite Canadians. We need to unite around our common identity that includes the French language, our English language, our military, the promise of Canada that anyone who works hard can
Thank
have a
you.
great life in a beautiful house on a safe street.
Thank you. Mr. Singh,
Oh
is
my
there
God.
not division in Canada?
Funny how
When I
they cut
travel
him off
throughout the
when
country,
he was about to say surrounded by
I
strong borders and
observe great unity, great
and great
solidarity.
soldiers and all of that. And they just cut
Canadians
him off.
want to defend our
Oh.
country. They do not want to become the 51st state. They want to protect what is dear to our hearts. When I talk to people about identity, people tell me our identity is taking care of one another. We have programs for that. For example, our healthcare system. We need to protect these systems and strengthen them, not cut them or sacrifice them. Now is the time to bring people together
Thank you.
to get things done with our solidarity.
Thank you. Mr. Blanchet.
I think that people confuse certain things. Some people think that all Canadians should follow one single line behind the federal government, and so we only have one economy. Mr. Trump's fear, or rather the threat of Mr. Trump has to be taken seriously, but instrumentalizing it for nation building in Canada, where Quebecers are being asked to be attached to their language as a frivolity, I can't agree with that.
Thank you. We'll go back.
Quebec's
to that.
uniqueness is also economic, and we
Mr.
have to be on the
Carney,
same level
Is there
playing
a
field.
division in Canada?
Well, there's always a risk. But I think that right now, Canadians are uniting, and they want to unite. Canadians want a positive agenda. There is solidarity here. Healthcare is a right here in Canada. It's not a big business like in the United States. We put a value on diversity here. And we also put importance on judicial independence. And, the potential of Canada is enormous because we're all in this together.
Thank you. So open debate. Mr. Blanchet, how can we think that Quebec, if it's on its own and independent, could be stronger to stand up to Trump and in comparison with all of Canada right now?
Does Canada need to be a province of Mexico to be allied to Mexico against the States? We're not in that debate this week, but Quebec does not need to be a Canadian province to talk of its own voice. Our economy is doing fairly well, but our economy is different to that of Canada's. And the announcements that have been made have helped Ontario Steel, Ontario Banking, the Ontario automotive industry to
Quebec
fund
aluminum.
Western oil. Those were the
aluminum.
investments made. The counter tariffs on aluminium are very harmful because people have to pay for the aluminium they
hate
sent
this
to be processed in
discussion
the
so
States.
much,
There's then reimported to Canada.
I hate the way it just
to the
chops up
States
the country
in
into like,
countervailing
the
tariffs.
Western
For
Canada,
that,
Alberta and their
nothing
oil,
happened.
Quebec and their whatever, and then I hate that.
But now,
I hate this
$2
so
billion
much.
has simply been signed by Mr. Carney for the automotive industry. He sees himself as a negotiator, but he hasn't even been re-elected yet. Should Quebecers not make sure that they have a strong voice that collaborates? I've already said that we would work with Canada, but I've asked to speak to Mr. Carney, but he's never called me. He's never wanted to talk to me. I want Quebec to be at the negotiating table for a stronger
Mr. Carney,
negotiating position with Canada.
is there also not a risk, like was the case with the automotive industry in Ontario, to this? Because this could happen to the detriment of saving other industries in our country. If we put all our eggs in the automotive basket.
Not at all. For example, our counter tariffs for the aluminum sector and steel, no, they're not bad. They're not bad at all.
We import aluminium cans from the States that comes from our
That's
mined
not
aluminium.
right at all. If I may, the counter tariffs for the aluminum sector are $30 billion. The counter tariffs, or $30 billion rather, the counter tariffs for the automotive sector, that's $8 billion. That's a huge difference because, there are a number of reasons for this, but our counter tariffs, it's not just for Quebec, it's for the workers there, are much higher.
I don't know where that money came from. I don't know when the industry will get that money.
We are using the counter tariffs.
What was it, $2 billion for automotive? Immediately for them, because we're shaking in our boots when the automotive industry is at risk. But aluminium was not supported. There's
Just
no
context
processing
here. Some of you really don't
capacity.
know.
There's no
Quebec,
help for temporary
manufactures a
workforces.
lot of the
$2
aluminum
billion
and steel
for the
that
automotive
Canada
industry.
exploits.
But nothing for aluminium. When it's
That's
Ontario,
why
the checks
they're
come
fighting for the
flying.
aluminum
But it has to be the same
industry
for other
so
places,
much.
especially Quebec.
And
That's-
the discussion
the
here is
numbers-
on whether the
your
federal
numbers
government
are
is
wrong.
favoring the automotive
Mr.
sector and
Poilievre.
Ontario over Quebec.
Yeah, but he's got a point when he says that the weakness in our country right now threatens our unity. Your Liberal government for 10 years has the worst track record on immigration, on housing, on inflation, on crime. But doesn't it embarrass you to ask Canadians for a fourth term of office after the worst Liberal record?
I've just become leader. And
Same
I've
members of
just
parliament, it's the
started
same old
as
promises.
And I've been Prime Minister for 1 month. And in that month, we have an agreement with the provinces. We have an agreement with Australia. We have an agreement with France. We have an agreement with the United Kingdom. We have set up negotiations for the next Prime Minister, and that's a decision that people at home are going to make.
You know, saying it's the same
And we've
people
done
and all
of
that, it doesn't seem to be working. It
in
needs to
this
switch
short
it up.
time. And we've also cut the tax. We've put in place programs for workers who are most affected by this tariff war, and all that in 1 month.
Okay.
Yeah, Mark Carney will take that all day if he keeps saying, "Oh, it's the same
Quebec
people" and
sent
all
a
that.
letter with 5
He'll take that all
requests.
day.
No one responded to it. We made requests, but we keep hearing, oh, we've spoken to provinces, things are great with Quebec, but we didn't get any response to our letter. Is it because of the final straight of the election campaign? What's going on?
Mr. Carney, you described healthcare as a right, and I agree with that. But you are talking about massive
not at
cuts
all.
to healthcare. You
Not at all.
admitted it.
Mr. Singh, I let you speak earlier.
The long-time
Singh,
Liberal government House
1,
leader, Karina Gold,
2,
agreed that there
3.
would be
Mr.
cuts.
Singh, cut his mic. I let you speak more earlier, but now we're nearing the end. We're talking about Quebec and French. Does Quebec have the right to defend French, even at the cost of using the notwithstanding clause upstream? Mr. Poilievre.
Yes. Quebec must defend French. It's the common language of Quebec, and I will defend French. My father was a francophone from Saskatchewan. I lost my French a little bit when I was a teenager, but I married a Quebecer. Our children speak French, and I understand why French needs to be protected. And that is why I will continue to support laws and policies that allow Quebec and the federal government to protect French all across Canada.
Using the notwithstanding clause to protect something. You're against that, Mr. Carney?
Well, there is a general question here around the use of the notwithstanding clause in a preventative way. And it's not necessarily a question just for Quebec. It's been used in Quebec, but it could also apply in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And it has. And so the question is, do we have rights and freedoms here in Canada? Are we equal? And we need to consider the right balance. Certainly, but the use of the notwithstanding clause in a preventative way, that's a question for the Supreme Court.
Mr. Blanchet, in terms of the use of the notwithstanding clause, obviously you have no problem with that.
Jean Chrétien, on behalf of Pierre Trudeau, negotiated with the provinces, and it led to the notwithstanding clause, and this wasn't signed on by Quebec. It was tested. It's not the type of use that is in question, it's how it is used. The Supreme Court has already decided. Mr. Carney wants to turn to the Supreme Court to disagree with itself in the decision it made with Quebec.
There are
It's all funded with Quebec money.
Interveners from Quebec who have challenged this to the Supreme Court.
You are going to take Quebec taxpayer money to contest a Quebec bill that is under Quebec jurisdiction. That was adopted by the National Assembly of Quebec.
Mr. Singh, on this notwithstanding clause for French.
I believe in protecting the French language. During this debate, I have tried to bring up health a few times. Mr. Roy cut me off a number of times. Look at my time on the clock. Every time I tried to bring up healthcare, I was responding directly to something that Mr. Carney said, because health is something that is important for me. It is about identity. It's something I am very passionate about. And every time I tried to bring it up, Mr. Roy called me out and cut me off. That is not fair. For me, the question of healthcare is crucial. When I talk to people on the street and ask them what is important to them, they say universal public healthcare. People ought to know that the other leaders on this stage tonight would cut healthcare funding. And I think that's wrong.
No.
Not now, Mr. Blanchet.
No, neither
two
Mr.
major leaders
Blanchet
have
nor
both
I have said
this.
that.
And I need to tell people because it's important. This is what I believe in. This is what I believe in and what the
No,
NDP
but
believes in.
That's not right to make allegations
Okay,
like that.
we talked about health earlier. I let you speak, but now we're moving on to another topic.
Yes, but now we need to bring it up in the context of
Okay.
identity. What is Canadian identity? Healthcare. We have to bring it up in this part of the debate. Canadian identity is about taking care of one another. We need our universal public healthcare system. It should be strengthened. It should be protected. We are in the midst of a healthcare crisis. It's supposed to be an open debate, so we should be able to talk about whatever topic comes up.
There's a lot of risk when it comes to the health of a language in
Let's
Quebec.
talk about language.
There's
Outside
healthcare
of
issues in Quebec as well, and I am here to protect the healthcare system for everyone, including Quebecers.
Outside of Quebec, Mr. Singh and others, the weighting of francophones has gone from 6% in 71 to 3.5% in 2021. How will you reverse this trend? People are listening to you across Canada.
Well, first of all, we are going to increase the level of Francophone immigrants outside of Quebec. We'll increase that from 10 to 12%. Second, we will strengthen Radio-Canada and CBC with new governance structure and new money. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut that. We are going to strengthen the
I think
telephone
Quebecers
industry
might
and the
like
Canadian
that
Council
answer,
for the
actually.
Arts so that we can increase training.
All right, Mr. Poilievre.
First of all, the Conservative Party supported the federal legislation to ensure that federally regulated workplaces in Quebec follow Bill 101. We also will increase funding to allow young people to take part in French immersion for Anglophones coming from outside Quebec, and that will enrich the French language. And third, we'll make sure Quebec has more control over immigrant selection so that they can better choose those who can be franchised and integrated into the labor market and Quebec culture. That's what we want to do to protect the French language.
Mr. Poilievre, of course, your position on Radio-Canada and the CBC has created a lot of concerns. You've continued to say that you would protect Radio-Canada because it provides a service to Francophone minorities across the country, but you would abolish the CBC. How is such a thing possible?
Well, it is possible. We have news networks.
But they share the same buildings. You understand how difficult it would
I do
be.
understand the situation. I will protect Radio-Canada's services because there's already other French language news services. TVA is an example. So it is possible to have news service that's focused on French news services, and the CBC can just operate with its own revenues as an NGO,
What would the
as a
timeline be?
non-governmental organization. The principle is that the government should simply do what the market cannot do, and the market would never be able to provide exclusive French services to Francophones all across Canada. So there is a role for the government to play in defending French news services. When I was a young person in Calgary, that was the only way for me to get news in French. So I would protect those services
Mr. Poilievre
because
is
there's a good
saying-
reason to do that.
Let me translate that. Mr. Poilievre wants to get rid of Radio-Canada and
No, that's not
CBC. And then he would write a check to other companies so that they can provide French language services. That's the wrong thing to do. We would protect Radio-Canada and CBC, especially in the context of a misinformation which is undermining our democracy. I am not a francophone, but I am a francophile. I love the French language. I have fallen in love with it. It enriches our country. Having Quebec benefits all of Canada. The forward-thinking ideas that have come out of Quebec, we need Quebec. We need the French language, and we will protect them.
For the first time since 2011, there are no women here. as leaders. I met with a young woman. This is a very short clip. I met with her earlier this week. Do you have a question for the leaders, something you're concerned about? In Canada, the status of women. Yeah, the status of women. You're worried about things moving backward? Yes, that there could be a rollback of women's rights by some parties. That concerns me. My question, would you commit to making sure that there are no women's rights that are rolled back? And, for example, would you push for having free contraception, as is already the case in some provinces? Is that something that you would commit to, starting with Mr. Poilievre?
We will not
I just popped the
eliminate
question
that.
in the
We will
chat for
protect
you guys.
women's rights. I have a message for Canadian women who are watching. We will not pass legislation that would restrict the right to abortion. That's been our policy for 20 years, and it won't change. That's a guarantee that I make to you. We will, in fact, broaden women's rights by dealing with crime against women. Women are often victims of assaulters who are released because of liberal legislation. They're released repeatedly, and that allows
What? You wouldn't
serious
vote
criminals
for?
to
I asked the
repeat
question. I said,
offend
who would you vote for
against
if
women.
Carney or
And
Poilievre were
we
not
are going to lock
contesting?
those people up. We're going
And
to
this
lock those
person
men
said,
up to protect women against
I
violence.
said none of them.
Of
Like,
course,
really? Not
our party
Jagmeet?
believes in
Not
women's rights.
Yves-François Blanchet?
We would never allow
Come on.
for any backsliding on that front. You brought up pharmacare. Well, it was the NDP that forced the Liberal government to bring in pharmacare. It covers now diabetes medication, but also contraceptives, and we believe that is crucial. Rights are important, but being able to access the right is also important. We are also the only party running a candidate slate that is half women. The other parties have seen backsliding on their candidate slates in terms of diverse people and women. But for us, it's an important issue. Our candidate slate must represent the Canadian public, and that means it should be half women. For us, we will always defend women's rights and also access
Thank you, Mr.
to
Blanchet.
those rights.
There is no member of the Bloc Québécois that will be able to table a bill or motions that are against abortion. Preventive made will also not be allowed. With American influence, we are in a very difficult place for women. There are many ways that invite women to participate in politics. We have reached
I could
parity.
tell you're
with the Bloc
a
Québécois.
woman.
We wanted it to be
You're a woman.
50-50, but
It looks like
in our current
you say
political
people and
culture,
women. Are women not people too?
I have many
Are
great
women
women
not
in my
people?
party. It's much
This
more
looks
difficult
like you
at the
took that
federal
one
level than in
personal.
Quebec.
Anyways,
Yes, I think that this, an aspect of politics right now, the negative politics that we're seeing, it's becoming more and more difficult to recruit women as candidates, and really any candidate. But absolutely, we defend the rights of women all the time. But what I'm concerned about is the use of the notwithstanding clause. Not in a preventative way, but after Supreme Court judgments have been made. That, what does that do? It takes away Canadians' rights and freedoms. And it creates, and Mr. Poilievre has proposed this I know the situation, but this is a very dangerous development, because if we start with that, abortion could be,
Give the right to
the
reply.
right to abortion could eventually be next.
Mr. Poilievre, you can answer.
Mr. Carney, I said in a case where a man kills 6 people in a premeditated way and the court released that person, that means he served 4 years for each life he took. The criminal in that case will be free in 50 years. You're talking about danger. That's what's dangerous. Liberal laws that allow criminals to circulate on our streets. I will never excuse for locking murderers up.
No, I'm sorry, but you're trying to change the Canadian
No.
Constitution.
All right,
That's what
gentlemen.
you've proposed.
I would use Section 33 to put an end to the crime that Liberals
You're
caused
starting there,
with their
and
policies
Where will you stop?
by stopping murderers. Yes.
That's a good attack by Carney.
Everyone knows that there should be severe penalties for murder. You're trying to sow division here. Everyone agrees on that front. If someone kills someone, there needs to be a strong punishment. You're not
No, that's
special
not
for
true.
proposing that.
No, the other three
Everyone
parties.
agrees.
All right, Mr. Blanchet. Very quickly, please.
Mr. Carney said that I voted for the new Official Languages Act bill. The money comes from the previous bill, and the official language minority community money comes from the bill. I was asked to bring changes. We brought the changes. We voted for, but we didn't want it to apply to Quebec because it harms Quebec.
Gentlemen, things didn't turn out perfectly, but Mr. Singh, you say you got 22 minutes compared to 24, 24, 25. Roughly equitable. I'm sorry that I did have to cut off your mic, but I'd like to wish all four of you good luck with the rest of the campaign. And I hope that we'll see your costed plans as soon as possible so that we can see how much all of your promises will cost. And I hope that everyone listening tonight will be able to make an informed decision now. Voting starts this weekend.
And the game.
And the match? I don't know. There's still a couple periods left. All right. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes this debate. See you next time. Good night.
Okay. So, that was a little bit more mellow than I was expecting. It was very flowy, it was a great discussion in that sense, but I don't know that this particular debate changed anybody's mind. You guys let me know, you guys that are watching at home, let me know if you felt like any of this changed your mind. Did anybody convert you? And I think it's more important to look at this also from the perspective of the smaller parties, Francois Blanchette and Jagmeet Singh. Did they convince you that you should cast your votes in their direction instead? So someone is saying here, you really need to change that handle. Saying how do you want me to say it? Anyways, she says, not impressed. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Yeah, I expect tomorrow's English debate will be a lot better. Yeah, this was, and she says it is a discussion, not a debate. It's like kumbaya. Now, I wouldn't say it was like kumbaya. I think they went at each other quite a bit, but there was a lot of discussing, and as I said earlier, I didn't feel like there was a lot of depth to what the discussion was. I thought it was very much surface level, which I don't think is helpful to people that are trying to vote. I was surprised when they published the time, when they showed the times that each candidate spoke in the end. It looked like everybody got about equal time, apart from maybe Jagmeet Singh. But it felt to me, and again, you can draw your conclusions here, it felt to me like Pierre Poilievre was a little bit within himself. He needs to do more if he wants to turn this around, right? That, I don't think he changed anybody's mind. And maybe that echoes what you're saying there. You said, none of them converted you and you're more disappointed. And that's the same thing. But I think, having watched this, the big winner coming out of this debate is Mark Carney. Not because he did anything, but because of what didn't happen, right? What I expected going into this was that Pierre Poilievre, knowing his struggles with French, would attempt to rough him up a little bit, get him off his game, get him off his rhythm. But he really couldn't land any excuse me. He really couldn't land any punches. He really couldn't lay a glove like that on Mark Carney. And he came to the point that he kept on kind of recycling these lines. And it just looked like, in my opinion, again, you can draw your conclusions here. It looked, in my opinion, like Mark Carney was ready with responses to those questions. You know, there wasn't, he didn't have that. He wasn't very punchy and maybe that's a tactic because some people have said, there's a chance that his usual prickly way of debating, wouldn't sell so well in this particular election. Maybe that's why he pulled it back a bit. But if he wants to turn this around, he needs to do something. He needs to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. He needs to go in. He needs to go in. What I was disappointed with, I've got to say, is the fact that even at this point of the election, where 2 weeks to election day, that there's no costed platform on either side. And this kind of tells you, I told you guys this maybe like 2 months ago. None of these guys, I'm not going to swear on this stream, I don't want it to get blocked, but none of these suckers is going to balance the budget. I keep telling you guys this. Mark Carney has this clever trick he's doing with like the operational side of the budget and the investment side of the budget. The operational side will be balanced and then the other side will invest. That's like saying that your left pocket, owes money, but your right pocket is debt free. You're still operating a friggin' deficit. That's all. It's shit in that sense. And for Pierre Poilievre, everybody we have these hopes for him about like, he's going to balance he's going to fix the budget. Notice in the campaign, he has said significantly less about fixing the budget. He has talked about cutting a lot of stuff, and I want to see how that improves the deficit. So I expect that these candidates have to. I want to see that costed platform. What I don't want to see is a situation. I don't know if you guys are in British Columbia. I'm in BC, and this happened during the BC election where a certain David Eby, you might not know him, but the current premier of BC was going up against John Rostad, who was the conservative candidate. Next thing you know, John Rostad was running a pretty good election up until the debate day. And he was the only candidate that hadn't released his costed platform. A costed platform meaning something that tells you how much your platform is going to cost, right? And how it's going to impact the budget, essentially. And eventually, when John Rostad did put out his costed platform, it turned out that he was increasing, and this is a conservative guy here, he was increasing the friggin' deficit compared to what the NDP government in BC was going to do. Now, I do not want to see that shit. I do not want to see that shit. Okay? So I'm curious, as I said, you guys have watched the French debate now. Did any of these guys change your mind? I as I said, I was very, very disappointed with Pierre Poilievre in this. I expected more. Mark Carney comes out winner in this because for the most part, nobody landed a real glove on him. And if he can go through these two debates without too much damage or a lot of damage, he will coast to an election victory. No questions asked. Right? I made a video maybe 2 days ago now, showing you that the polls, most people would like to doubt the polls, but actually coming up on election day, the polls in the last 4 elections, which is what I studied, the last 4 elections have been a good predictor of who wins the election. Like as far back as 2011. Go back, you can watch my video if you don't want to do the math, if you don't want to do the comparison yourself. Go back and look at it. The polls coming up to maybe like 2 days, 3 days to the election day, those polls are usually firm. And they have so far been a good predictor of where the election is going to go. So Mark Carney is in the box seat right now. It's hard to see him losing that, which is wild when you consider that Pierre Poilievre is about to lose an election where he's been leading by a friggin' 25 points or something, right? It's wild. But he's not running a bad campaign. But something needs to happen to sort of take away from what Mark Carney is offering. Mark Carney is offering, whether it's in his credibility or something, in terms of, but unfortunately, it looks like they're finding it difficult to take away from that, because yeah, the man has done a lot of big stuff, right? He is, whatever you might say about him, he has been at the top in many really big positions. He has held big positions of responsibility. So it's hard to kind of punch a hole in his credibility. However, some Pierre Poilievre has to do it, or at least some of the other two candidates, some of the other two hopefuls, and in this case, Jagmeet Singh and Yves-François Blanchet, and they have to try and take away from him if we're going to see anything different from a liberal majority. I think Yves-François Blanchet might have gotten a little bit more headway than Jagmeet Singh, because Quebec is obviously very, I would say they're very sensitive about like protection of the French language, about that, semi-autonomy of the province. They're very sensitive about that. So Yves-François Blanchet has always shown that he's willing to ride for his people. He's willing to fight for them on the federal level. So I don't know that Pierre Poilievre's current lead in Quebec is going to stay the same. Now, okay, you know what? Let's do a cool thing. I'll show you guys where the polls are right now, and obviously by the end of this week, you guys know I'm gonna tell you exactly who I expect to win the election. At the moment, obviously, it looks like Mark Carney. I will tell you who I predict is going to win. Last time I did one of these things, I was kind of I was pretty close actually on the BC election. I predicted that David Eby was going to win, and he won. I did miss out on I said he was going to win a minority, but he ended up winning a majority. Anyways, here's a question for you guys actually. What are you guys looking to see tomorrow in the English debate? What do you need to see to firm up your vote? Actually, I think let's save a lot of the talk for tomorrow's English debate. I'm curious, what do you guys need to see in tomorrow's English debate? What I want to see is a little bit more discussion, more in-depth discussion on policy. Yeah, and hopefully, these guys really start to deliver something that I can get my teeth into. You guys, if you're watching this after I cut the video short here, I'm going off. I'm just gonna go off right now. But you guys, you can still get in the comment section. Let me know, what do you want to see in the English debate? And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and join me for the English debate tomorrow. There'll be none of this translation thing that's going on. My French is not strong enough to handle all the French that was being thrown around there, so I decided to watch the English dub. But tomorrow it's going to be English debate, so you guys can get in the conversation, and I'll be in my element, talking all that shit that you guys love, So join me tomorrow at 3:45 p.m. I'll be live. No late coming this time, okay? I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.